Does God exist? Or is the material universe all that is, or ever was, or ever will be? Did the universe begin, or has it always existed? Atheists have typically said that the universe has been here forever. The universe is just there, and that's all. First, let's consider the second law of thermodynamics. It tells us the universe is slowly running out of usable energy, and that's the point. If the universe had been here forever, it would have run out of usable energy by now. The second law points us to a universe that has a definite beginning. This is further confirmed by a series of remarkable scientific discoveries. In 1915, Albert Einstein presented his general theory of relativity. This allowed us, for the first time, to talk meaningfully about the past history of the universe. Next, Alexander Friedmann and George Lemaitre, each working with Einstein's equations, predicted that the universe is expanding. Then in 1929, Edwin Hubble measured the red shift in light from distant galaxies. This empirical evidence confirmed not only that the universe is expanding, but that it sprang into being from a single point in the finite past. It was a monumental discovery, almost beyond comprehension. And since the universe can't cause itself, its cause must be beyond the space-time universe. It must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, uncaused, and unimaginably powerful, much like God.
From galaxies and stars, down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere. There'd be no stars, no life, no planets, no chemistry. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. If the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life. The fact is, our universe permits physical, interactive life only because these, and many other numbers, have been independently and exquisitely balanced on a razor's edge. Wherever physicists look, they see examples of fine-tuning. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. If anyone claims not to be surprised by the special features that the universe has, he's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and unlikely. What is the best explanation for this astounding phenomenon? Given the implausibility of physical necessity or chance, the best explanation for why the universe is fine-tuned for life may very well be it was designed that way. A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a superintellect monkeyed with physics, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all, It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge.
Well, starting with the historicity of Jesus and whether or not he actually existed, I think scholars have pretty much settled that, where if you ask just about any scholar out there, they'll tell you he did exist. He was born, he lived, he died, he was crucified by the Romans.
Well, if Jesus were not historical, it would be the biggest hoax imaginable. History itself is dated around Jesus. Bart Ehrman, a massive critic of Christianity, says that pretty much, quote, every sane historian on the planet, whether Christian, Jewish, Muslim, pagan, agnostic, or atheist, they've concluded that Jesus was historical on the basis of compelling historical evidence. Whether we like it or not, says Ehrman, Jesus certainly existed. How can he be so sure? Well, there are stacks of independent sources. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Peter, James, then a dozen sources outside the Bible. These sources come from far too early to have given time for myth-making to develop, and these writings are far too inconvenient for those who are supposed to have fabricated them. Jesus existed. Virtually no one with any relevant expertise doubts it. So why does the question arise? I think it's because people recognize there's something legendary about Jesus. In the myths, there's a hero who saves the day through an epic sacrifice, and in the Gospels, we see Jesus doing just that. He's the ultimate hero. And maybe we think Jesus sounds like all the other stories, but here's something to consider. Maybe all the other stories sound like Jesus, because he is the true and original hero, the one who actually showed up in time and space. So press into the historical details, read the Gospels for yourself. There you will meet a figure of legendary proportions who is also a figure of real history. At that point you'll make the most wonderful realization. The greatest story is actually true.
I like to look at the evidence for the resurrection in 4 categories. The first one is, did Jesus die on the cross? Was he dead? Virtually every scholar on planet Earth concedes that Jesus was dead after crucifixion. We have no record of anyone anywhere ever surviving a full Roman crucifixion. Even the Journal of the American Medical Association published a peer-reviewed scientific medical study of the evidence for the death of Jesus and said clearly the weight of the evidence indicates that Jesus was dead even before the wound to his side was inflicted. Even the atheist New Testament scholar, Gerd Ludemann, says historically it's indisputable that Jesus was dead. So Jesus was dead. The second category of evidence is the early accounts we have for the resurrection. In other words, I used to think as an atheist that the resurrection was a legend, and that took a long time to develop in the ancient world. But what I learned is that we have preserved for us a creed of the earliest Christian church. A creed that is an eyewitness-based report of the resurrection of Jesus. Now, this creed has been dated back by scholars to within months of the death of Jesus. Within months. That is historical gold. So we've got a news flash from ancient history on the resurrection.
Outside manuscripts and other historical documents detail how there was this fledgling movement of Christians that came out of this area around Galilee, and how they were persecuted by the Roman Empire, and how despite that persecution, as we fast forward to today, that they still existed. They grew and they flourished, and today there's about 2.9 billion Christians worldwide. So historically, there's this picture, this story of what shouldn't have been. It started with this one man who was crucified on the cross that turned into this small little fledgling group of people, movement of people that were being persecuted by this huge empire that somehow survived that persecution when there was tons of other faiths or religions that were birthing up in that time that didn't. They were crushed because they were against the state, but yet somehow Christianity not only survived, but grew and flourished and became what it is today. That shouldn't have happened. That in and of itself was kind of a miracle.
Third category of evidence is the empty tomb. And the best evidence for that is even the opponents of Jesus implicitly admitted the tomb was empty. Because when the disciples began proclaiming that Jesus had risen, what the opponents said was, the disciples stole the body. Now they're conceding the tomb's empty, they're just trying to explain how it got empty. So everybody's conceding the tomb was empty. How did it get empty is really the issue, and that goes to the fourth category of evidence, which is eyewitnesses. You know, for most of what we know about ancient history, it comes from one or maybe two sources of information. And yet, for the conviction of the disciples that they encountered the resurrected Jesus, we have no fewer than 9 ancient sources, inside and outside the New Testament, confirming and corroborating the conviction of the disciples that they encountered the risen Christ. That is an avalanche of historical data. So you put all that together and you have a really good case for Easter.
There's active people that are Christians that are being moved by what they say is the Spirit and being motivated by the words of God telling them to love their neighbor as themselves and to care for the least of these, that is propelling them to be a solution to a problem. For me, that comes back to my faith. That comes back to my belief that there is a God, that Christianity is that way, and that Jesus is our source.